Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hey friends, Jason here. In this episode, I had the opportunity to speak with Ed Boss, founder and CEO of Riteks. It's a chemical distributor down in Houston, but just a great conversation, and the chemical industry is just a little bit different than the hard goods industry. They've got, let's just say the stuff that they have in their warehouse can blow other stuff up. And actually, that was really how Ed got involved with this whole thing. As a little kid, he had those chemistry sets that are not quite as safe as they are today. They let us get away with a lot of stuff like that when we were younger. And, we had lawn darts and, I look back at some like big wheels and we had stuff that really could damage us. And so, he took that and through the influence of really some great teachers actually along the way and people that got him excited about the sciences, he wound up making a whole career out of the chemical industry. And so anyway, it's one of those interviews where it was just kind of fun to listen about the process and not only getting dragged into a family business. And so many of my guests and myself included are, I'm going to go do what my family did. Ed just really took a passion and an interest from his childhood and really developed this organization over the years that he's been in for 40 years. And so anyway, I really enjoyed this conversation and I hope you do too. This episode was brought to you by my friends at Profit2. A couple of years ago, I was introduced to Profit2 through a client who had been working with them for over a year. This client had been struggling with improving gross margins and was looking for a service to help them recapture some of their lost opportunities. Through their work with Profit2, it took about a year, but they were able to bump their gross margins by almost 2 points. For this distributor, and frankly for anyone in the business, this margin enhancement was a big deal. Beyond the pricing service, Profit2 has started helping clients look at cost and rebate management. If you want to discover hidden margin opportunities, come take a look at what Profit2 can do for you. Learn more at www.distributiontalk.com/profit2. That's profit with a number 2. All right. Hey, Ed, thank you so much for coming on Distribution Talk. I always appreciate having guests come in and speak with me.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity today, and I'm excited about to see where the conversation goes.
Absolutely. I appreciate Lucinda for putting us together. I've had a nice relationship with NACD, and we'll definitely get into that a little bit later. But before we do, would you mind just giving me a little history lesson on why did you get into distribution, the chemical industry, the whole shoot and match? Go ahead and take it away from any point.
I'm actually into, my 40th year of my career. And so probably to this day, I wonder, how did this all happen? And it starts probably innocent enough. I think through school and then also through college, I was trying to figure out, just like anybody else, what I want to do when I grow up. And I didn't necessarily have that all figured out. At the time, I went off to, actually, it was the University of Wisconsin for me. So I grew up in, I'm a Badger. I grew up in that area, went to school, and I liked math and science, and I actually wanted to earn money when I grew up along the way. And so I chose chemical engineering because it was a challenge, and I got about 3/4 into that, and I realized I probably didn't actually want to become a chemical engineer, and instead my passion fell more into I like selling things. And it started as basic as that. And I came from a family of, my father was in the tire business. My grandfather was also in the sales. So I just came from a family that's just what we did. And so when I graduated, I immediately was interviewing with large chemical companies that allowed me to use my chemical engineering degree. And they were very eager to find people that had those kind of degrees and actually get into sales and sell chemicals.
Yeah, it's a nice hybrid. I mean, you had the background, from the chemical engineering side. And let's face it, a lot of chemical engineers, probably a lot of your peers that went through that program are probably not the greatest salespeople. And that was really never their desire, is to be in that sales side of it.
It was really easy to get a job back in that time period if you could do chemistry and wanted to do sales, because they're actually pretty hard to find at that time period. I think it's a little bit more prevalent today. But I took a job with Union Carbide. It was an absolutely wonderful experience. I had a great training program, and they actually taught me how to then go create value for customers by taking the products and, in a product portfolio. And I enjoyed that job right from the beginning. In a lot of ways, it's almost a teaching job versus a sales job, because you're just taking products that have some value of performance. And for me, it was going around to different markets, different end use applications, and teaching them why they would want to use a specific chemical. And I enjoyed that process. I enjoyed it right from the beginning. I still enjoy it. It's kind of what we do. What happened to me on the Union Carbide story is actually, unfortunately, they had a very bad accident, and it was in Bhopal, India, back in 1984. And it changed the dynamics of that company. And effectively, for me as a young sales guy, and I just got a very similar job, just with a different company called Air Products and Chemicals. And that's my history from a corporate basis. And in fact, it's a key part of my history, I think, in running the company, is because I had great training on large corporate processes and way to do things. And it was a great background of all that. And as well as Air Products is when I first started even meeting people that were in the chemical distribution arena. I didn't even know that existed up until that point. And they gave me the opportunity of actually working with several specialty distributors across the country. And they became actually, so I'm in my, mid to late 20s at that point. I was trying to still figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up. And the people that I looked up to were the owners of these specialty chemical distributors. That's really, I became friends with multiple people across the country. And that's who I said, I'd love to grow up to be like Bob. Bob has, he's doing this. And so I tricked my wife. I went home one day and I said, this is what I want to do. And, it wasn't a casual decision, but we both left our corporate world and we started the company up in 1989 with a desk in the house. That's literally, so I'm one of those that I just broke away from corporate life. I knew how to sell. I knew the process of that. I knew nothing else. And that was a really hard lesson of, there's bankers and lawyers and all of that.
Well, it's so funny. Sales guys sometimes, they get upset at their current employer and like, well, I'm going to go start my own gig. And there's a pie in the sky and they don't know about all the other fun stuff you get to play with along the way.
My wife and I are, we're persistent, very diligent people, but I can tell you that that's what it took in those beginning years, because there was a lot of parts of the business that we just had to learn the hard way. The good part of all that is 30 years later, we actually have grown up with that and we know every aspect of the business because we had to live it. We had to live it along the way.
If you could look back at those years, again, this is the early time. And first of all, I think that, having a partner that supports you in that decision and says, okay, I'm in for the ride. Let's go for this. I mean, that's a huge part. But what was one of the biggest challenges that you all had to overcome that early on? I heard the word bankers, but there may be another.
There were so many challenges, but oddly enough, first of all, I don't care what your business plan is. It always is going to take longer than what you think. It just does. Where you think, I love to tell a story. Very early on, I live in Houston. We were very early, and I took a business trip to Dallas. And I was up there for a week. I made wonderful sales calls, and I come back and I'm visiting with my wife. She asked me how the week is. And I said, man, it was fabulous. It was absolutely fabulous. I visited with so-and-so and he ordered a sample of such and such. And the next guy liked what I was saying on this. And I went through the whole week like that. And she was patiently listening. And then she looked at me and she goes, well, what'd you sell? And I said, oh, I didn't sell anything, I realized the whole time factor of the distribution game is probably the biggest challenge. Our typical sales call to actually earning money can take a couple of years. And so from there, the challenge of, how do you stay in existence in order to be able to do all that? And then the other real challenge is eventually a customer says yes. And then you go home and go, oh man, they said yes. I got to scale up. I have to get my inventory in line. I have to be prepared to be able to service this account. And I maybe was not fully prepared for the customer to say yes. And that became a big challenge in the early years. Still is. When a new customer comes on board and you want to really take care of them and do it right, you have to have everything all lined up in order to be able to do that. And sometimes you don't have control over your own timing of when that happens.
Right. And you're excited, and maybe it's a new customer type, some sort of new customer segment you're looking at. And all of a sudden they did say yes. Now what? Now I'm in trouble. Now you step back and you go back to that late 20s, early 30s self and like, what did I get myself into this time? I did it again.
Exactly. And so it was a good challenge, and it took way longer than what we were originally projecting, but I'm still married to her. We're still okay.
Hey, that's good. I guess, some of those explanations worked out apparently.
Right. And it's been a wild ride.
Yeah. So is this now, which company was this?
I started up a company in 1989 called Bosco Industries. It was, what I would call a classical, at the time, it was a classical regional specialty chemical distributor. The model is we would go out and get, represent other people's product lines, that we would have typically a contract with that vendor that says, allowed us the sales and marketing responsibilities within a certain regional geography. For me, it was Texas and the states that touch Texas. And that was our original model. I think if I fast forward, actually, that's the model that has changed the most in the chemical distribution world. Is the geographies have changed. There's a lot of mergers and acquisitions on both the customer and the vendor side. And so we had to deal with a lot of change, over that time period. But originally, that's where we started. That was the desk in the house, and then we had some success, and we hired another sales guy, and we grew from that. Fairly quickly after that, actually, it was 1992 for us. It was only 3 years later where, I'm an entrepreneur at heart, so it's what we do. A customer is saying, gee, we're really wishing we could find somebody to blend and repackage some material for us. It was in the chemical world. And I made the mistake of saying, oh, well, I think we can do that. And it's the story of where the customer eventually said, not right away, but a few months into it, they say, well, you have the business, go make it happen. And that's the day I had to go home and say, well, I got to go get a warehouse. I got to go get equipment in order to be able to do it. I mean, we had to move very quickly on that. But from that, I formed a second company. I formed a company called Riteks, which was dedicated. To me, it was a separate business model at the time, and that's the part of the business that was providing custom solutions, blending, packaging. We did some tech service work at the time, and I operated both Bosco Industries, classic distributor, and Riteks, which was our service arm of the company, really since 1992.
Was this the blending primarily dry bulk, or you primarily packaged?
Our specialty is we have a lot of background in epoxy and urethane type.
Okay. Resins.
They tend to be resins, liquids.
Okay.
They tend to be hard to handle because of either viscosity or corrosion or whatever. But we became very good at that part of the world is where we started. And to this day, we still do a lot in epoxies and urethanes.
Gotcha. So you ran both companies. You had them kind of side by side, and then eventually you decided to focus on one. How'd that story come together?
Yeah, that wasn't necessarily a plan because, frankly, I really enjoyed running both companies. Well, the way we did it from an efficiency basis is they were the same. We had the same ERP system. We had the same back office. And if the phone rang, our employees knew to answer, whether it was Riteks or Bosco Industries. And it was the same employees along the way. I think a lot of our customers knew that it was the same. And that's where we got a lot of our crossover business. It was really working for us. Both companies were doing quite well from a growth pattern throughout those years, and we enjoyed that. But go back to where I started, and that's in the chemical distribution side of it. The dynamics changed dramatically over those 25 years. And one of the biggest changes is probably like when Walgreens or CVS started coming in and started taking over territories of the private pharmacy. It's the small guys, what I would call the protected regions didn't become protected any longer. And so I think any regional chemical distributor has been fighting that over the last 25 years. And some are still doing quite well at it. And some just fought it to a point where they had to make different decisions. And either they sold their business or merged with others. And what we elected to do in 2017, and it was a very good decision for us, is kind of win-win-win. We had a large global distributor, a company called IMCD, come in, and they were very interested in our geography. They didn't have a presence there, and we had the right product portfolio, the geography. And so we ended up selling that portion of the business to IMCD. And when I say it was a win-win-win, is that, I think IMCD was to this day still pleased with that decision. And it allowed us to 100% go focus in on the service part. So we focus on Riteks today, and that transition in 2017 allowed us to do that.
So basically, you sold off your namesake, though.
Yeah, I did.
You sold off Boss Company. I mean,
I've had people ask me on that. It's like, how you sell the name? And, honestly, it wasn't as emotional as I thought it would be.
Sure.
Obviously, we formed that company because we had no marketing team back in 1989. We said, what do you want to call your company? We said, I don't know, Boss Company. And it became, Boss Company.
No, I get it. Yeah, interesting.
But yes, we sold the name. We sold that part of the business.
So you had warehousing associated with that. You had facilities associated with that. Is that that also went all with the business?
What we kept is a couple facilities that were exclusively focused in on blending, packaging. We've got labs in each of these facilities that are supporting the markets that we're servicing. And, that's the part that stayed on the Riteks side.
It's got to be fun, though. I mean, think about, your chemical engineering background, and you're playing with different substances and chemicals, to go into those labs and to kind of look and see, hey, what are you guys doing? And what are you playing with? Are you the company meddler right now?
Oh, they don't let me in the labs anymore.
I'm sure. Yeah. Okay. I got you.
It's kind of like they don't let me get on the forklift. They don't let me in the labs. I'm kind of okay with that. But to answer your question, actually, to this day, I mean, I have little desire to retire because the business is so fun on the development side and solving problem side. Our company's done a super job at hiring like way smarter people than I ever was. But it started with me being creative and thinking out of the box on a chemical basis. And that's part of my background. And today that's what we do, but we do it kind of as a team approach and not that's what we do. And I don't joke. They don't let me in the lab. I get to talk and say some ideas. They just don't let me physically do it. They
don't let you play with the stuff anymore.
Yeah.
I understand. So I have to ask, were you a kid that played with a chemistry set? Was that part of your growing up, or did you blow things up and then hide that from your parents?
No, my parents knew that I blew things up. How's that? So, right. My parents, they didn't even know what a chemical engineer was. And frankly, I really didn't either until I got to be maybe a freshman in college. And so I always was very interested. I'm one of those stories where I had some really good science teachers back in the middle school ages. To this day, I'm honored that I had that opportunity to be influenced by a science teacher that took me down this path. And so I knew that's what I liked, for me, way more than, history and, some of the other directions I could have gone. So to answer your questions, then they started buying me back then the chemistry sets were not as safe as what they are today. So I may have smoked a few things along the, smoked, not smoked inhaling, but, I may have caused some smoke. And
Sure. No, I kind of growing up with things like lawn darts and, things that were not as safe as.
It's the same time period.
Yeah. Things that
I had all of those.
You kind of laugh and you're like, man, how did we get away with those? How did they allow us to play with that? So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I appreciate that, your mention of influential people along the way. I look at educators along the way, that can inspire kids, to kind of head towards this engineering, this, kind of STEM side of the business or of the education world. If you get the right teacher in there and they make that chemistry fun or biology or whatever it may be, that, oh boy, it can have such an amazing impact on that child's life and really take them to where you are today.
I think it's imperative. I mean, even today, we're heavily involved with, it's called Chemical Education Foundation, it's CEF, and it's a wonderful program that is designed to get more kids involved, as many kids involved in the STEM programs as early as possible, starting in the elementary time period. So to me, it's a very worthwhile part of, how we spend our time. And because I was so heavily influenced, and I would not have had this career. I'd be selling tires. I'm not saying that's a bad career, because it was a good career, but that's what I probably would have been doing. And, this is a very different path.
Yeah. And you think back to those people who did influence you and you wonder if you ran across them, what would you say to them today? I mean, I think that's always fascinated me is I know that different people have gone in careers, have run into that person who was that turning point person. And really, what do you say to them? It's like, well, thank you for my career. I mean, what do you do?
I mean, it's a hug.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
For me, it was Bruce Swanson. And Bruce Swanson just passed away here a couple of years ago. He was in his 80s, and I ran into him along the way. And of course, the real dedicated educators like that, what'd you do with your life? And you get to tell your story, and it's fun to watch how they take pride in that. And he did. He had a super big influence on. Actually, I stopped going down to the principal's office all the time because I talked so much, and then I was able to focus in on what he was trying to teach me. So it actually worked very well. It was a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I digressed a little bit there, but I just thought that was just kind of an interesting thread. Anyhow, going back when you decided to really go towards the Riteks side, and as you said, you've been blending and looking for these solutions. This is something that most distributors really would love to push that service side of the business, even though we talk service a lot, but how do you monetize it? How do you get to that point where it's not just giving away services or technical expertise or problem solving? It's now, how do we turn it into a business? And that's really what you all did.
We did. I think I had a vision fairly early on. Is part of the fun that I had in the early years is becoming truly a product expert on a particular line of chemicals. So that's what I learned in my Union Carbide and Air Products years, is how to truly be an expert on, let's just say, epoxy curing agents, a particular line, that kind of thing. But the reality is the real fun part of that is when you're actually helping your customer base be successful with their customer base, and in getting involved on how do you do different formulations in order to achieve that. And for me, it allowed me to do a lot of different things. One challenge of sales sometimes of becoming an expert on a particular product is that's what you do. You wake up every day and you go sell. If you're an expert on paper clips, you're going to go sell paper clips every day. And in the chemical world, it allowed me to go, one day I might be selling to the cosmetic industry. The next day I might be selling into the food industry. The next day I might be selling into the coatings industry. And I really enjoyed that. But for us to be successful at that, in that model, is to us, we had to become very creative on not only standing a product, but how products came together, how to create those formulas. And we focused on that ability. we made a key decision very early on that we follow to this day, because one option you have as a company on that is to start up a lab and provide lab services for your customer base of solutions and then charge for those lab services. That's one model. In our particular case, I did not want to do that. I wanted to provide those lab services. But the way we make our money is our solutions. It's like making a cake mix. Is our solutions will be here, use this kind of flour, this kind of sugar, this kind of butter. And it just so happens that in my product portfolio, I have the sugar, the butter, and the flour that is solving their problem along the way. So we've never to this day have charged for our lab services and our technical advice.
Okay.
We make money then by selling the products that we're recommending as part of that. That's our whole business model of what we're doing. And it started off very long. Does it make sense?
It does. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Rather than actually monetizing that service, it's really more, again, you're still in the selling business, the selling of hard goods products business.
And by the way, those products that are in that cake mix, I don't manufacture, whereas that's the distribution part of it is just the way you take it to market is slightly different than the way we originally did back in the Bosco Industries days.
Gotcha. And you've become fairly diverse in the type of industries that you're going into today, right?
It's because I'm too chicken to 100% invest in any one particular market. And so we play in big markets, oil and gas industry, big market. It has lots of opportunity with, a roller coaster business model. So we play in the concrete and construction area, big market. And then we play in coatings. And for us, the definition of coating, it's industrial coating. So these are products that are, it's not house paint. These are products that are going to sell for $100 a gallon that have very high performance requirements in order to be able to justify that. And so to answer your question, that has allowed us to handle the cycles of business for 30 years, kind of the ups and downs of all of those, without having to not had to adjust our workforce. We've had to, in other words, we've been able to grow year over year because those are three different markets that are large, that have lots of opportunity.
Absolutely. No, I mean, you get into marine coatings and you get into all of these different things that it is actually kind of a fascinating world. And so I was exposed to the whole chemical distribution world several years ago through NACD, the association that you have spent so many years involved with. And it was always fascinating, just kind of listening. And, as somebody who travels around to different vertical markets, I get to learn a lot about these different verticals and, what makes them tick. But this one has always been a little bit different in that in the hard goods business, we had things on the shelf and they would sit on the shelf and we could play it a little more fast and loose. I'll put it that way. In your world, you couldn't do that. There's a couple more regulations that are associated with that.
Quite a bit more, actually. I'd love to tell my NACD story. To me, it's such a key part of actually me personally, my career, and certainly a key part of our success of Riteks and what we do out in the marketplace. And for me, it goes back to 1992. So I'd been in business for a couple of years. At that time, I was aggressively pursuing more products to represent, take to market as a distributor. And we had a large company, a Fortune 100 company that selected us to do that. I was so excited, and it was a big turning point in our history. They sent a contract that says, okay, here's our contract. I signed it because I was so excited. And probably about a week later, I read it. And in there, it had a paragraph that said, thou shalt join NACD and follow the RD requirements of AD, responsible distribution requirements of NACD. And I knew nothing about that. I did, in other words, so back then we didn't have Google, by the way. So it's the old fashioned way of, 1-800-NACD, and they introduced what they did. So the truth is of that history is I joined NACD because I got this contract that says, you shall join this association.
Okay. Yeah. You were conscripted into NACD. Okay.
So I did it with my kind of my arm twisting a little bit. But the reason that it was so important on the vendors to go down that path with their distributors is because the mission of NACD was really revolved around what they call their responsible distribution program. And it is how to manage chemical distribution safely, and not only for your own employees, but for your community, for the vendors, for your customers. It was a very detailed process of how to do that. And so as a newbie, I sign up. I had to start from the ground up of how to meet the requirements of responsible distribution. And that's what probably got me married most to the association, is because all the members, I don't care whether it was a top distributor, global distributor, all the way down to the one-man show, they all were extremely helpful on any member going down the path of trying to do RD properly. And to this day, I'd say that's probably the biggest value of that association, is to be able to learn from all the other members of chemical safety. Now, there's a lot of other things that you get to learn along the way of how to operate a business and processes. And it can be as simple as, what phone system are you using? It's a wonderful association to network and learn. For me personally, I ended up very early on, just started showing up to their meetings. I had I'm going to say, a older mentor in there that convinced me to actually not just show up, but to actually truly participate on some of their committees. At first, I thought it was a trick, because I thought, why do I want to do all that? But it was great advice. It was absolutely great advice, because it allowed me to rub elbows and network with people that I would have never rubbed elbows and networked with. And that's not just other distributors. That's people like you who come in and provide great guidance and to multiple different businesses. I've met a lot of politicians and regulatory people that I would have never had an opportunity of getting to know. So I've used that all to my advantage, both personally and in our business, and how we run our, just the culture of Riteks. A lot of it is evolved because of being involved with NACD, the association.
Absolutely. I mean, I think listeners of the show, know that I am a huge proponent of not only joining their trade association, but being involved with it. And I think there is a little bit of a difference. One of my good friends, he refers to them as bleacher creatures. Those folks who are hanging out on the sidelines and watching the show. But when you get involved, you can raise your hand, you say, yes, I'll be on this committee, or yes, I'll go into a board position and I'll provide that support. I think that's where you really get the stuff. I mean, that's where it all starts coming together. And I definitely believe that what you put into these, you'll get back tenfold.
It's hard to convince a new person who hasn't experienced that firsthand, because in a lot of ways, you have to learn that value just by doing it. And, if someone tells you, okay, join this committee and truly participate, immediately you go down to, well, that's just more time that I don't have. And the reality is, I'll go back to, it's who you're learning from, who you're associating. It's tenfold easy in regards to what you get back out of it along the way. And everybody, literally everybody that has gone down this path will say the same thing. But everybody will also say from day one, they would rather have been on the sidelines because they didn't understand the value that they were going to get out of it along the way. And so I think all associations, like say, I've now got, I've got 30 years of truly being committed on volunteering in some position within NACD. So I've got a long history. And in fact, I'm currently the chairman of the association, which means I get to really have a lot of fun with it for the next couple of years. And I already know that when the couple of years is up, I'm going to miss that. I'm going to make the best of it for the next couple of years on my part.
Oh, it'll be great. Yeah, I think you will have a great time. I look back fondly on my president position, and it was a great time. It was great. And frankly, it launched this side of my career. I think it's just one of those things that I know I was reluctant as well. I know I was reluctant, but I still see those folks who convinced me to join the board and start rolling through the ranks. And it was the best decision that I ever made. And I think that you're right. A lot of newer folks maybe just don't understand that value. And I think that's why I keep asking people each time I find people who have gone through and really gone and serve their industry in this way that, I like to tell this story because I really want that to resonate eventually, that if you really want to up your game and you want to enjoy the career that you've chosen, this is the right way to do it. This is absolutely the right way to do it, is get involved with that group. Whatever the group is, find a way to get involved.
Well, at this stage of my career, it is, I use the word, quite entertaining to me for me to actually spend some time with the next generation on convincing them that that is the right path to actually even consider. So I enjoy that part of this stage of my career. And I've influenced multiple people along the way that, you can just see that there are future leaders of the association, of their own company, of the industry. And that's the fun part. I mean, that's the fun part of it all.
Absolutely. Well, Ed, hey, I really appreciate you taking the time, to share the story and to kind of wrap up here, talking a little bit about how to stay involved. And it's just been a pleasure getting to know you a little bit better here. So thanks again for taking the time.
Thank you. This was an honor to participate in this. Actually, I've not participated in something like this before, so this was fun to do. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
See, maybe this will be a whole new career for you.
Yeah, this will be my, my fifth career. This will be good. Yeah.
There it is. This is the next one coming along. You can be a podcast host. That and $1.25 will get you a cup of coffee. So
exactly.
All right,
exactly.
My man. Well, hey, thanks again, and I look forward to the next time our paths cross. Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider sharing with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget to follow the show on your favorite podcast application. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by the brilliant team at the Creative Impostor Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, the Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.